welcome to Soccer 101 and an episode where we get into the concept of chants and songs at soccer games. When did this practice start? How's it evolved? Why are lots of them naughty? And what have been the high notes and the bum tunes heard in stadiums around the world? My name's Ryan Bailey, and I first have to say, we love you, Taylor. We do. We love you, Taylor. We do. We love you, Taylor. We do, Taylor. We love you. Hello, Taylor.
Hello, that was magical, and also I feel like you maybe had like a few cans of lager before doing it, and then now you're right back to your sober self, but you got the drunken intonation in there, and that is well done, my friend.
I'm embarrassed to say I actually had my arms up in the air and like emphasizing the notes as well, as I would do if I were in the stands. I'm not embarrassed to say that. I'm proud to say that.
You should be. You should be proud. Yeah, you don't need to be embarrassed about raising your arms. I was ready for you to be like, I did actually get drunk. That would be more of a problem.
Okay. Ready for this one? Now also here. Graham Rutherford! Graham Rutherford, how are you?
I mean, that was wonderful. I was expecting some sort of filthy anti-Scottish chant in there, so I'm quite thankful for that and how I didn't have to sing, "You're getting sacked in the morning, sacked in the morning."
We're going to have some fun with this episode, I imagine. Listener, please be prepared for all of us to be singing badly at various points. I should warn you. So, chants, singing, means of generating noise and an atmosphere at games. I think that's the purpose. We can agree. If I was going to look at Webster's, Taylor, you know, showing support, taunting your rivals. And the tradition seems to go back to the oral folk song, the singing communally, you know, transmitting tales through oral tradition. It's that kind of vibe that you get from it. And I think it's quite an odd thing when you think about it, and maybe going back a few decades, for thousands of repressed men to stand and sing in front of one another. Which leads me, Graham, to the origin of chanting, which, according to some of my notes, may just have been Scotland.
Yep. I mean, we invented pretty much everything about football, and then England took it from us. So, yeah, I mean, I was also reading about that, how football chanting originated as war cries, and how the first recorded example of this was in Scotland. And I thought, yeah, that figures. I'm not sure chanting has moved on that much beyond war cries in Scottish football. We haven't developed much beyond that.
Yeah, what I could see, sort of late 19th century in Scotland was where things kind of began. And one of the first examples, a little further away from Scotland, in Norwich, On the Ball City, which, if you look on YouTube, there's plenty of versions with musical accompaniments, which is fun. Taylor, what did you find about the origins of chanting?
I think Daryl Grove would be happy to know that by all accounts that I read, the first organized chant written down was by a famed composer, Edward Elgar. I know we all know him, his many rip-roaring tunes.
Sure.
Written about wolves inside right back Billy Malpass. I guess it was he banged the leather for the goal was the headline in the newspaper. Elgar, I guess, thought that was a very catchy thing to sing or to say, and so he wrote a tune about it, and that became a song, but it didn't gain major traction. And I think, Ryan, you are correct that the Norwich one is the one that seems to get a lot of the credit for being the first chant. But I also think you're correct in pointing out, and Graham as well, that like when you're looking at the history of when groups come together, they get loud and tend to like chant things. That feels like it goes back to like the people living in caves era. So I think like it makes sense that you would get chanting whenever you get large groups of people together, especially large groups of drunken men, which would have been the situation then and now. But I think it's interesting to see how they sort of evolved and how they grew, and how like one group of fans would hear something and like it, and then suddenly that became theirs, and then it became somebody else's, then it spread and became global. I think it's really interesting to track sort of the history and the spread of some of these chants.
Taylor, just to pick up on something, it's Sir Edward Elgar to you.
I apologize.
Don't be disrespectful to a knight of the realm. And also, according to Wikipedia, he wrote an anthem called He Banged the Leather for Goal, which didn't catch on, which is a shame, because that's an awesome title for a chant.
Do you ever wonder, I wonder this every time I think about someone being knighted, is like where that comes from historically. Do you ever think, like, if you brought back, like, Crusader Knights, they'd be like, who was knighted? Like, I'm sorry, what? Like, I don't know. I just don't think... I like the way it's gone, because I feel like people should be knighted for artistic achievement. But, like, how it started versus how it's going is a very different story.
Indeed. So the Origin of Chants have gone back a very long way and spread a very long distance. But gents, when I think of the Origins of Chanting, and if I was to picture it in my mind, what I see is the 1960s and then maybe late 1950s, but early 1960s to mid 1960s, and like the cop. And if you go on YouTube, you can watch fans on the cop singing Beatles songs. Like literally, there's video of them singing "She Loves You." Nothing to do with soccer, but it's this celebration of Liverpudlian culture. That they had the Mersey Beat, they had the Beatles, they had like Jerry and the Pacemakers, who obviously, with "You'll Never Walk Alone" being an anthem of theirs still to the day. So quite often, chanting can reach its origins, at least, Graham, can reach beyond praising players on the field.
Yeah, I think to be honest, those are the best examples of songs and anthems and chants. There's a bit of blurred lines there because obviously not all anthems are chants and not all chants are anthems and so on. But yeah, absolutely. And for me, chanting and singing in soccer is a real idiosyncrasy of the game. It's something that marks it out from other sports. Yes, I know there's singing and chanting in other sports and there's noisy atmospheres, but it tends to be quite generic. Whereas in soccer, chanting is rich with meaning and history, and most clubs kind of have some form of an anthem. I mean, whether it's "You'll Never Walk Alone," which is an anthem for Celtic, Liverpool, Borussia Dortmund, countless clubs really around the world. You have Z-Cars, which I guess is more of an anthem than a chant, given that I don't think it has any lyrics, which Everton play as they walk out at Goodison Park. Or as Spurs play before their players walk out at their new stadium, the theme tune for the Phantom Menace. Which I'm not here to judge.
Is it Duel of the Fates?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. It's the one that kind of goes...
Yeah, that's Duel of the Fates. That's fine. Yeah. That one's acceptable.
I mean, I'm not here to judge. I just think all those kind of examples, they just add a little bit more to the tapestry of our game, if I can call it that.
I always appreciate Graham saying I'm not here to judge, well, very much seeming to have the tone of judging.
And to be clear, Graham, Z-Cars, or Z-Cars, if you were going with an American slant, was a 70s TV show, was it not? And they just took the theme tune from it, pretty much, like pretty randomly. And that leads me to sort of the melodies and tunes that are used in chants, because the sources of the melodies are so disparate and so random. So you'll get, for example, church hymns, like, "You're not singing anymore." Like, that's like "Guide Me, O Thou Great Redeemer," if I'm not mistaken. And you'll get opera sort of standards as a basis for chants. Folk songs, like Bladen Races, something they sing at Newcastle. That comes from the folk tradition, and they've just adapted lyrics to make it Newcastle-centric, of course. And then you go further into the present, and you get pop songs. And, I sung Hey Jude in honor of Graham Rudman at the top of this show. And obviously, they're the Beatles. You can understand. Everybody knows Hey Jude. Everybody knows that melody. And then you get some strange ones. Like Go West. The Pet Shop Boys is like 1-0 to the Arsenal. It's like, Go West. Like, how did that come about? And it gets even more interesting, Taylor, when you consider, like, Will Griggs on Fire.
Yeah.
When that's
a good one.
90s Europop, Freed from Desire by Gala. And another one on that note, by the way, it's just come to me. Do you remember when they did the Colo and Yaya Toure song at Man City?
Colo. Yep.
So that was 2 Unlimited, Dutch techno band, which not many people who aren't my age realise.
That's so weird.
So it's what I find strange is which melodies are latched onto and which ones people... Because they have to be instantly identifiable for everybody to join in. And for Freed from Desire by Gala to be as recognised as a Beatles song or an opera standard or, something from the church, that's fascinating to me. Also, something else I'll say, I've been speaking for a long time, Taylor, but something else that fascinates me is how many chants from British soccer, at the very least, have a US melody. Like, Stars and Stripes Forever is used as a melody. Glory, Glory, Man United. Glory, Glory, Man United, Battle Hymn of the Republic from the American Civil War. Saints Go Marching In, jazz standard. So there's lots of stuff like that that's very, very interesting to me, Taylor.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that was the thing that I really enjoyed seeing and then found very confusing at times, which I'm interested to hear you all thoughts on as we get towards like the more modern era. But it makes a lot of sense that going back to the hymnal or the hymns and sort of opera standards, such as they were in like the late 1800s into the early 20th century, again, that would be what people knew, right? So if you want people to sing along to a song, all they have to do is sort of learn the generally very basic lyrics. They already know the melody, so everybody can pick it up pretty quickly. And so then it's interesting to see almost, it tends to be like a couple years behind that you can see the styles changing, and suddenly jazz is more involved, and there's a bunch of different ones, and then you get more pop and more rock, and then it kind of moves on from there to more electronic, and now there are still the ones that I was trying to find a way to be sort of charitable with this, because I don't want to, attack anyone's musical choices, but there are some today that are like the sort of mixtape that I don't need to hear, because I saw that Barry Manilow, Rod Stewart, and Tom Jones are still frequently utilized before games and in chants. And I don't know if that speaks to their enduring popularity in England, but I did find it confusing, some of what stuck and some of what moved on.
Yeah, that's what's fascinating. I mean, you can understand a church hymn, being pretty pretty recognized, but when it comes to, I don't know, a Tom Jones, I suppose Tom Jones is pretty recognized.
Yeah, I think, Ryan, to what you were talking about, like, that's where I also think the sort of microness of certain songs like makes a lot of sense. And it's not like I think a lot of people know Joy Division or New Order, but one of my favorite chants growing up, I don't really love Ryan Giggs these days. I don't really like Ryan Giggs at all these days, but like he was a player that I loved to watch when he was in his pomp. And there was the Gigs Will Tear You Apart, which is set to Love Will Tear You Apart by Joy Division, who are obviously a very influential Manchester band. So I like when the even like local music becomes a part of the chants of the songs that are sung. That feels really, really appropriate, and I think also endures, which is why that song still gets sung, again, less so these days.
I personally think it's not to be dismissive in any way, but I think it's quite simple in that a lot of the songs, they will take something that is current at that time, and then the chants will take on a life of their own. And then when you get modern interpretations of that chant, of that song, it's not really an interpretation of the song, it's an interpretation of the chant that everyone knows. So I'm thinking of, Sloop John B by the Beach Boys is used for countless chants, including the famine song in Scotland, which is a sectarian song sung about Irish immigrants, which I'm probably not going to sing that one, at least not on air. And so that one gets used for what's the one about I want to go home, I want to go home, this is the worst trip I've ever been on. And then that got used for, like, he scores when he wants, Jamie Vardy, he scores when he wants, or you could replace any player's name with another player's name there. And so that isn't really coming from Sloop John B. That's coming from, like, the chants that everyone knows. And then the more current ones, you'll pick up, like, Seven Nation Army, which has to be the most chanted pop song of all time. Italian fans picked that up for, I think, the 2006 World Cup.
Yeah. It's
now chanted by Atletico Madrid fans and countless fans around the world, to the point where Jack White says that song doesn't belong to him anymore. He feels like he doesn't actually have ownership of it anymore. So I think it's just... fans tend to bounce off other fans, even different fan bases. I'm thinking Liverpool were singing that "Allez, Allez, Allez" song when they were when they won the Champions League that season. Then the next season there was countless other fan bases using that chant. So yeah, it tends to all be quite derivative of something else.
Do you all like, does that bother you at all? I've always wondered that about fan bases, because I remember, again, just watching Manchester United and hearing the songs for Wayne Rooney, for example, which is problematic these days, but like that song, but then hearing that same melody elsewhere and being like, wait, they stole that one. And then it only occurred to me like years later that maybe they didn't steal it, maybe Man United stole it, and maybe that's how it goes. It's not a Man United centric world, but like, are there certain things that you feel like are basically sacrosanct that can't be sung or can't be used by others? Because even You'll Never Walk Alone is obviously sung by Celtic, and I think other clubs around the world. The Poznan celebration that City fans used to do, I don't know if they still do, but like that obviously comes from Lech Poznan. So I think like there are certain cases when it is okay or isn't that big of a deal, and then a lot of it is sort of the tune becomes standardized and then everybody picks it up and makes it their own. Are there any that you think sort of can only be sung by one club or one fan base?
I think You Never Walk Alone has probably... it's sung by more than one club, of course, but I don't think Man United let me sing it at any time, for example. But,
or Rangers.
But like, I don't think there's a sense of ownership in the melodies necessarily, though. Particularly when you're adapting the lyrics for your own team. An example being my team, AFC Wimbledon. We sing a version of Bladen Races. which you very much associate
By the
with
way,
Newcastle
I want to
United.
slow that down for Americans. He is saying Blaydon, Blaydon, and then races.
Blaydon
because
races.
It sounds a little bit when you say it fast like you are saying blatant racism. And I just want to be very clear that you're not saying, we sing songs about blatant racism. That happened in the 60s, less so now.
We do not do that, I can assure you. But yeah, Blaydon races, which is, I suppose, came from a race meet back in the day. And we sing a version of that with adapted lyrics for us, and there's no beef about that kind of thing. I think it comes from this sort of oral tradition songbook sharing of melodies, this folk tradition kind of thing. I think that spirit lives through. Is that fair to say, Graham?
Yeah, I think so. And I think ideally at its heart, you want something that's easy to remember, something that can be adapted in a number of ways, something you can easily add lyrics to. So you're probably not going to get kind of many math rock tunes in football chants. But
Any what?
Math rock? Math rock, that's a genre. Like Foles originally counted themselves as math rock.
Okay.
You could hear the confidence go out of Graham's voice there. Is that like nerd rock?
It's like very intricate riffs, like very difficult to like pin down as a melody. And Foles became like more pop towards like more recently. I don't know if listeners know of Foles, but like originally, yeah, they were a math rock band. But anyway, yeah, you want something that's easy to remember, and I think the best example. Sorry to change the subject,
please.
Slightly, Ryan, but the best example of a pop song turned chant, I think, and is Three Lions by the Lightning Seeds, Baddiel and Skinner, in that it's literally got a chant in the song that's so easy to, like, you don't have to adapt that in any way. It's a chart song, but it's also a terrace song, and yeah, for me, it's like the perfect chant / anthem. It does both jobs very, very well.
I concur. On that note, should we take a very quick little break? We've got advertising responsibilities, and so on. We'll be back with more after this short break.
Today's episode of Soccer 101 is brought to you by NetSuite. Successful companies know faster growth requires the right tools. If you're doing 1, 10, or hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, NetSuite by Oracle gives a full picture of your business, finance, inventory, HR, customers, and more all in one place. And perhaps as importantly, it does it very quickly. Slow works if you are on vacation or if you're a sloth. If you're a sloth, slow is sort of your nature. If you're a cheetah, not so much. And if you want the cheetah of financial systems, then NetSuite by Oracle is the way to go. You can automate your processes and close your books in no time, no matter how big your business grows. And it's worth noting, 93% of surveyed businesses increased their visibility and control since switching to NetSuite. Right now, special financing is back. NetSuite is offering a one-of-a-kind financing program only for those ready to switch today. Head to netsuite.com/sports right now. Get special financing at netsuite.com/sports. One more time, netsuite.com/sports.
Soccer 101, welcome back. We are talking songs, we are talking chants. I'd like to darken the mood slightly, gents, if that's all right. I'd like to talk about when chants go bad. The negative side of this thing. I mean, let's be fair. Over the years, we have seen bad chanting. We've seen politically charged chanting, anti-Semitic chanting. I'm thinking Tottenham having chants about going to Rome and see the Pope, that kind of thing. Racist chanting, hateful stuff. One of the things that always got me, there's a lot of hate and there's a lot of taunting of opposition in chants. And that's not a great thing, let's be honest about that. But the one that we always used to hear back in the day, well, and certainly in the area I grew up, was, "You're going home in a London ambulance." And I thought, okay, it's threatening, but nobody goes home in an ambulance. You go to the hospital in an ambulance. What are you talking about? Anyway, and then you've got things like 10 German bombers, which England fans disappointingly still sing, sort of 10 green bottles, a nursery rhyme that's been adapted to be a bit xenophobic and nationalistic. And then there's these little things. I think I mentioned this on the Total Soccer Show recently about I'm concerned to bring my children to Wimbledon games who are 6 and 8 years old because of the example that some of the chanting sets. So I was at a game the other day where the manager of the opposing team was a rotund gentleman. He had a few extra pounds on him. And all the chants are, "Who ate all the pies?" and that kind of stuff. And, that doesn't sit very well in 2021 with, that's fat shaming, essentially. That's judging someone by their appearance. And that's the kind of thing that it's interesting because you can see how there was racism in the past, there was hateful stuff in the past that's not acceptable now. That kind of thing, I think, really should be phased out as well. Graham, you obviously, in Scotland, you inferred this earlier, that there's a lot of politically charged stuff going on as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously stuff happens everywhere, but I think this is something I have a lot of personal experience in, given the way that Scottish football is, and I think it's important to note two clubs in particular. Let's be honest with this, Celtic and Rangers. That rivalry, the songs and chants that are sung at those matches, they don't have anything to do with soccer at all. In fact, if you went to an Old Firm derby, you'd be lucky to hear a chant or a song about something that was soccer related. And indeed, sectarian singing is a real problem, not just at those matches, but it happens, let's be honest with it happens every single week. It's something that the clubs have tried to eradicate. I'm not sure they will ever be able to. It seems like a really deep-rooted cultural and societal issue. It's been that way for as long as I can remember, and it's a bit of a stain on our game, and it is an utterly dominant subject. Every single month there is a story that breaks through, and as I say, it happens every single week. And I wish it wasn't the case. It's something we could certainly do without.
Graham, what is like? I'm assuming you've been to an Old Firm derby,
yes,
or a few. Like, what is the vibe, the atmosphere in? What is the atmosphere in that stadium? Because I think, for me, I read about the Old Firm derby and about the sectarian clashes and how tense it was. But when you're not experiencing it, it becomes this almost like, oh, that sounds really cool. It sounds like it would be really interesting to get to hear that and see that. And I remember even to an extent, like hearing songs about the Troubles and then talking to British people about that and realizing like they do not want to talk about that. That is not a thing that is of any interest to them because it reminds them of a very dark period. But for a person who didn't experience it, I think that lived in experience like isn't there. And so to me, it's just like, oh, it's an interesting history. It's an interesting story. It's an interesting sort of like rivalry between the two. Whereas I think, I'm assuming if you've lived it, if you've experienced it, it is less interesting and more so intimidating and mildly frightening.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's definitely frightening in cases. I think it still can be, choose my words carefully here, I think it can still be interesting while still being something you wish wasn't a thing, wasn't around. That's how I would describe it. I think there's a lot of cultural nuance and societal nuance, and there's a lot of debate about which songs are sectarian and which aren't, and obviously people use that debate to blur things to their own advantage so they can sing the hateful songs that they want to sing. So you have to keep your wits about you in that sort of discussion. But yes, I've been to Old Firm games. I've been to Old Firm games at Celtic. I've been to Old Firm games at Rangers, and I've been to one at Hampden as well. And that was the one I remember being quite scared in that environment because the press box is between the two sides. So Hampden, obviously, if you're at a Celtic or a Rangers game, the majority of the stadium is home fans. So you can only get one side of it, which in a weird way diffuses the situation slightly just because it's so one-sided. Whereas if you go to Hampden, it's half and half, and the press box is in the middle of those two halves, and fans are throwing things over the press box and shouting things, and just so much venom as well between the two sets of fans, and that was a very uncomfortable experience, and a lot of the chanting has a role to play in that. Ryan kind of went through some of the names of controversial or offensive chants. I couldn't go through some of the names of the Celtic and Rangers chants because we would get censored and thrown off air. That's how bad they are, and they really are pretty hate filled, and they've got nothing to do with football. And but I don't know how we're going to end this situation. It's very deep rooted.
Yeah, and
it probably is. It probably is. I guess, again, speaking as an outsider, I think where you do probably have to have more of a zero tolerance approach because, like, Ryan, to your point about who ate all the pies, like, that is a thing that you can just sort of say about anybody who's slightly heavy. And it stood out to me because for the longest time, I thought the Man United chant about Rafa Benitez was kind of hilarious, the fat Spanish waiter, because there was a time when that is kind of what he looked like. And it felt like, oh, it's clever. It's not just saying he's overweight. It's like really specifically describing him. But then, like, I think about it like presently, and I like Rafa Benitez, and it is sort of like, that is like not a thing that you probably need to be singing. And it probably is the slippery slope argument into like, once you start singing one very specifically negative thing about one person, you can probably go down that road pretty quickly. So maybe it should just be songs in favor of your club as opposed to against the other one.
I think, to my shame, Taylor, when we talk about Man United chants, I used to be amused by the Park Ji-sung chant because not because of well, because it's quite against Liverpool fans. It's quite insulting to them. That was what amused me about it. And then when you actually listen to the whole thing, you're like, oh, it's super racist. And
and also very classist, if I remember the lyrics of that about Liverpool, which is not ideal.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah, there's that one too. Is it the hubcaps one?
So the Ji-sung Park one, does it not make reference to council houses?
Yes, it does, and the consumption of certain rodents within.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know that one. I only know the other problematic Ji-sung Park one.
Oh boy.
Yeah,
let's talk off air about that, Taylor. I was going to say
Well, I think, but that's what I think we're sort of, that is like an important conversation. I think not to just kind of keep listing offensive songs, but to point out how many of them, like how many songs that I remember. Like, I didn't sing because I was like sitting alone in my living room watching games, but I remember being sung and thinking at the time, like, oh, that's cool that they have a song about that player. And then you see it from that player's perspective, and they're probably like enjoy having a song, but when there are stereotypes about Asian people included in that song, it becomes more of a just like, oh, it's not really even about that person anymore. It's about like the crowd amusing themselves almost at the expense of the player. And that, I think, manifests more recently as Man United fans singing the Lukaku song about the size of his genitalia.
That was a bad one, yeah.
And him saying like, yeah, I don't really need that song sung. Even if it's theoretically a compliment, it's still like not a thing I enjoy. And I feel like there are probably people out there who'd be like, oh, you guys are soft. You don't know what you're talking about. We get called soft all the time. But for me, like, if you're supposed to be singing a song supporting your club or supporting a player, the player should ideally enjoy that song and want it to be sung, as opposed to so many of them are problematic in various ways. So hopefully that is changing a little bit. But I think that is an important distinction to draw, that even if it's about a player and supporting them, it can still have those negative overtones.
And I was going to mention to you, Taylor, I thought that negative chanting and, this kind of unpleasant behavior was what set European soccer apart from the US. And then I suddenly thought of the problematic chant that is sung on the North American continent when a goalkeeper is lining up to take a kick.
Yeah, I mean that would be our certain L-Tree fans. I think U.S. fans definitely not in favor of that chant. But yeah, I mean, and that's one that, as much as FIFA and CONCACAF and the Mexican FA say they are taking seriously and dealing with. Like, it happened, I think, multiple times in the Gold Cup before that warning was issued, and it's supposed to be the 3-step process. But yeah, it definitely exists. And not just in Mexico, here in the U.S., there's plenty of aggressive chants and angry rivalries that manifest as negative lyrics. But I do think, Ryan, overall, your idea is probably accurate, because I also think that when you don't have sometimes history can be a bonus and sometimes it can be baggage. And when you don't have the kind of long lineage of what this song means and what it relates to and the sectarian differences ingrained in the song, it leaves you open to using Biggie instead of Barry Manilow, or using, I don't know, like the Dead Kennedys instead of Jerry and the Pacemakers. Like, I think there is something to be said for American songs having, I think, more modernity to them, because like soccer in this country is more modern. It's a newer thing than it is pretty much anywhere else. And so I think the songs and the chants probably reflect that a bit.
That concept, by the way, Taylor, of not necessarily having the weight of things, the political weight of things behind the things in North American chanting, that reminds me of the fact that you go to a bar in North America and you can order an Irish car bomb. And you would definitely not do that in London. You would not do that. When I grew up, and that was very much a thing you were scared of every day, you would not be ordering that.
Dude, and it's really strange to me, because like there's that one, which is obvious, but then other little differences, like a black and tan is also not a thing I feel like people should be ordering, because my understanding of history is
hold on. I've never heard. These are drinks names in America.
Yes.
Wow.
And this gets to, I think, weirdly, it connects to like one of the main things I wanted to mention, which is just that if you don't know the history of a song, or you don't know the lyrics of a song because it's sung in a foreign language, I have priors with both of those, you can put yourselves in awkward situations. And it's just a good reminder that if there's a thing that seems like it might be offensive, basically anything that has a description that is rooted in an ethnicity or a religion, it's going to be offensive, and you can know that. But yeah, people at bars order black and tans, which is what the uniforms of the pro-monarchy troops. Is that what it was during the Troubles?
Yeah.
And see how Ryan and Graham both kind of get a little bit quieter there? This is what I'm talking about. That is the thing, whereas an American, it's like, yeah, you guys want to talk about that? And people who lived it will say, no, thank you, and please don't order that beverage.
Oh, Taylor, to seg easily into the idea of chanting in the US and songs in the US and in US soccer culture. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, it goes a lot beyond USA, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. I actually watching Charlotte FC evolve as I have been doing a little bit of work for them, and the fans have like a Slack channel where they have a chant section. And they're all writing them and pitching them to each other. And that's how many Wimbledon chants evolved over the years as well. Like, on forums, people saying, let's try this one in the next game, that kind of thing, which is cool. So Charlotte's going to have to the Saints marching in, we've got beer, banks, and soccer. I say Charlotte is wonderful, that kind of thing. And I was pleased to see that the Columbus Crew sing Can't Help Falling in Love, Elvis Presley, because AS Wimbledon sing that too. Oh, kindred spirits. But your thoughts, Taylor, on the culture of singing at games in the US, and also capos and having them led, having song sheets, and the prescriptive nature occasionally of these things.
I think I understand why Europeans or people who lived in Europe and then were exposed to American supporter culture would be confused and honestly find it to be a bit artificial. I honestly do get that, but I also understand why it is the way it is over here, because you don't have that same focus on chanting and singing and standing and being an active participant in the games. You have the outliers here, like Texas A&M, we talked about this recently, have the 12th man and the idea that the crowd itself is part of the team. And that is, it stands out as like that being a Texas A&M thing, because I don't think it becomes ingrained and everybody talks about the 12th man, but fundamentally there isn't this idea that everybody's got to be, singing and losing their minds to pick up that atmosphere. And how often you would get, at least when I was growing up, people being annoyed that people were standing and blocking the view. And, hey, let's all sit down until something happens. And like the old kickers coach would talk about, because he was initially a player in 1993, he would talk about crowds used to cheer when the ball was kicked long, because it was like, ooh, what a big kick. And how the kind of understanding of the game has evolved and the crowd support has evolved with it. But I think if you're still coming from a background of, you go to a game and you sit in your seat and then you cheer when a big thing happens, and aside from that you eat your hot dog, you need people to sort of lead that and be those motivators and get people involved. And it's where I think the capos are important, and creating that sort of identity is really useful, but then also spreading that identity to the fans. And so I know this isn't like a unique thing to Richmond, but it's my experience with the kickers that they have the little barcode that you can scan that will bring up all the chants, and then you have them right there on your phone, and if you want to sing along you can. And I think you kind of need those, like the groups to take the lead and the individual leaders and the capos in those groups to take that lead, to then have people follow to establish more of it. Because I do think if you've been to a game where you've got 10, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 people singing and screaming and chanting, like the atmosphere, it never stops. And even if the game itself is kind of dull, when you have that intensity on all four corners of the pitch, it's impossible to switch off, and it's really hard to just start looking at your phone and check other scores and see what's going on. You're plugged in. You're really into it. And I think there are clubs in this country that have done a really good job of creating that atmosphere, and I think it does give them a pretty big advantage.
Now, we've spoken a lot on this episode about English language chanting, gents. We should turn our attention also to the international nature of these chants. Mm-hmm. And, English-speaking countries aren't by far not the only places where chanting happens. I found a few. One of my favorites I found was something I found that Dynamo Dresden fans were chanting at Bayern Munich fans to the tune of Yellow Submarine by the Beatles. It went, Wir sind den Bayern, die Lederhosen aus, die Lederhosen aus. It is, we'll pull down the Bayern fans or the Bavarians' pants, is what they were singing. We'll pull down your pants. I thought that was wonderful. As perhaps Graham, maybe a more famous example would be Bella Ciao, the Italian folk song, which was an anti-fascist song used to protest Mussolini and his regime during the post-World War II, presumably during World War II and the resistance and all that. Which I was also reading that a Lazio player got in trouble for singing it during his onboarding. You know that tradition of stand him on the chair and have him sing a song when he first joins the team. He got in trouble because he sang Bella Ciao, and the fans were like, "Dude, we're fascists. You can't be doing that."
Yeah, who is that player? Because he's my new favorite player.
Yeah, I'll look it up. But it was that was a story I came across, and I mean, that's a troubling thing in itself. I don't live that far from the Stadio Olimpico these days. There are fascist statues everywhere around there in the Foro Italico. Anyway, Graham, any thoughts on international chants?
Yeah, I just looked through some examples. So I think one South American chant that definitely deserves a mention is, and the kind of generic name it's given to it is Vamos, which we all kind of know the meaning of that. It's a chant that originated in Peru, originated at Universitario, which is a club in Lima, and it's been adapted by fans all over that continent. So it's a song that's chanted by national team fans of Chile, Ecuador, Peru, and in fact, this is a song that it's heard in South American football to such an extent that there was a 2018 World Cup qualifying match between Peru and Argentina at La Bombonera, where Boca Juniors obviously play, and both sets of fans were singing it, and it was the Peruvians that were leading it, and they'd changed it to Let's Go Peruvians, and the Argentinian fans were so upset with how their team were playing that the whole stadium was joining in as singing Let's Go Peru, and obviously they knew the tune because it's something that is just it's everywhere in South American football, and it's a chant that's actually sung by DC United and Orlando City fans as well, and it's infiltrated MLS culture in a number of different places, and I'm going to make one more mention, and I'm really, really bending the rules here on this one because it's not really a chant or an anthem. It's certainly a song, but I love it so much. It's the Sala Parta, which is a percussion performance that takes place at San Mames before Athletic Club games. I always try and catch it, and thankfully La Liga TV, they tend to showcase it. It's quite a thing. So it's a song that's played on a big long board, which is struck with two sticks, usually by two men. There's two men standing behind this board in the stands, and it makes this brilliantly atmospheric song and sound. And the history behind it is that it's a Basque tradition that was common back in the day at things like weddings and festivals, and weirdly, apple harvests, which when I was doing my research is apparently like a big communal thing in the Basque Country. So they used this in the early days of the club to alert the locals that the team was about to play. And I just love stuff like that.
Graham, fun fact, I've seen that performed at the old San Mames. It's pretty cool.
Oh, have you? Really?
Yeah. I went to about 2008. I saw Athletic Club play Real Zaragoza. I had a press pass. I was down by the benches, and I was chatting with Jermaine Pennant, who's playing for Zaragoza. Fun fact. And he didn't get on the field. Anyway, Taylor, do you have any favourite international chants you wanted to?
Yeah, Horto Magico from Panathinaikos is the one that I think caught fire. The Magical Weed, I believe it is. And that one spread around the world and is sung all over the place. That was a big one that seems to have caught fire. The other one that stands out to me, I know it from Galatasaray, but it's the one that goes like la 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 la, oh Jim Bom Bom, but you'll hear it everywhere. Usually Germany, you'll hear it in the background, but because it's like any four syllables basically. So you hear it as like la 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 Bayern Munich. Like you'll hear it in the Bundesliga a lot, and that one seems to be one that you can make into whatever you need it to be, and it's very simple and people catch on really fast. But that one seems to have spread across a couple different continents.
And is there any more you could speak to, Taylor, about your time in Istanbul and the kind of chanting you would hear? Was it aggressive? Was there some fun stuff?
Yeah, there was a few of them. My favorite remains that Galatasaray's post-goal celebratory song is I Will Survive by Gloria Gaynor. And it really is I think it's like a more disco-y version of it, but it's still, I guess that it's in and of itself is disco, but it's more of a pop one. But yes, they have, I shared a few on Twitter, or maybe I'll put one into this episode. There's some really, really, really great ones, and they're very involved. But then you do run into, this is one of the moments when I was chanting along, not understanding, and the gist of it, I can't remember the actual lyrics, but it was along the lines of them saying Yabanji Hayer over and over and over again, which was I was singing along, and then I asked somebody what it meant, and it meant no foreigners, because they didn't want some sighting who was not from Turkey. And so an American in Turkey chanting no to foreigners is probably not the look that you need. So that is where I'm saying that maybe make sure that you know what you're chanting. But there's a few, and there's one that when Galatasaray won the title when we lived there that I happen to know. And the supporters group that was in our neighborhood that was particularly raucous was so excited that I knew that song that they gave me a scarf, and I found out years later, actually not even years later, just a day later, that it was the communist supporters group of Galatasaray. So it's this amazing. It has like Hakan Şükür and Che Guevara on it, both of them wearing Galatasaray kits, and it's phenomenal. So yes, I think if you learn the appropriate songs, then you can get super cool scarves. That's how it works.
Thank you, Conrad Rockwell, for explaining that one for us. I'd like to finish up this episode by maybe talking about some of our favorite chants, our very favorite chants. And to me, I think it's always the impromptu ones that get me, the ones that have just come out of a situation. Like, do you remember when Jason Punchin came onto the field late for a game and there were chants to the reasons as to why he came onto the field late and to maybe what he was doing that delayed his entrance? Things like that very much amuse me. I think my very favourite one is from 2013 at Anfield, and John Joe Shelby is warming up on the sidelines. There's videos of this on YouTube. And they're singing, the Liverpool fans, home fans are singing, "He's coming for you, he's coming for you, Harry Potter, he's coming for you," because he looks a bit like Voldemort. And John Joe Shelby, he actually quite loves it. You can see him chucking along, and he gives them a clap for it. And that's just, I mean, it had the potential to be mean-spirited, but it was taken well, and I thought that was really, really fun, Graham.
Yeah, and along the same sort of lines, my favourite one that reacting to a situation was, Taylor, you'll remember when Rio Ferdinand was banned for missing a drugs test when he was at Manchester
excuse me,
United.
he was in the mall and his phone didn't go off, so he didn't know he was supposed to. I don't know what you're talking about, Graham. This is totally above board.
His lawyer.
Oh boy.
Anyway, so Rio Ferdinand is banned for what was it, 8-9 months? It was quite a long time, wasn't it?
Unfairly.
And so Man United play West Ham. And he's obviously missing for that game, and West Ham are his former club. West Ham fans sing, "His name is Rio and he watches from the stand."
Nice.
Which is incredible. That is genuinely funny.
Oh, that's wonderful.
I did not know that one. That is amazing. And that is like when they're clever, and I think that's what I was like trying to speak to with the Rafa Benitez one, which isn't really clever, but when it's the fans collectively, when it's a group of people collectively just being sarcastic or tongue in cheek, I think that's when I get really happy. So like there was like whenever a big club has a downturn in form, like when Chelsea, before they sacked Mourinho for the second time, they won a game, and I remember the Chelsea fans, they scored a goal, and the Chelsea fans started chanting, like, "We are staying up." Like, when those moments happen, when it's just, like, cleverly commenting on your own situation, or maybe cleverly commenting on your opponent's situation, I think those are my favorite ones.
Yeah, the other one I have to mention, given our previous discussions about Scottish cuisine, is that when Scotland played Italy in, when would that be? 2006, 2007? We played them in Barry. I remember the stadium that we played them in. It was a strange stadium. Anyway, it was a World Cup qualifier. And I remember laughing because I could hear it on the TV. Scotland fans in Italy singing, "Deep fry your pizzas. We're going to deep fry your pizzas."
What is that chant? What is that song? Like,
so that's Slip John B, isn't it? That's the thing that I put in our group chat. That's where that comes from. Yeah, it's just a slightly adapted version of that. So
learn something.
And we did deep fry their pizzas,
and you continue to do so.
Yeah.
I really enjoy call and response ones as well. And there's one that was the one I shared on Twitter that like it's really great when you have the entire stadium, and then with Galatasaray they would do it where like each part of the stadium was responsible for a different lyric, so it wasn't just one side doing it back and forth. You'd have like the sideline and then the other sideline and then one touchline and then the other touchline, and it would sort of reverberate like that again. So you have to be on your toes for the whole game, because if you switch off, then your side isn't singing their part. That is always really great to me, to hear that sort of back and forth and the like slowness of it. I do also want to ask you all if we're looking for a fan group to be like the model for how to be like to sing important songs when they're right, but then also to sing funny and clever songs, would the Irish at any international competition be the fans to point to?
Possibly. I mean, I'm trying to think of some examples.
Because Fields of Athenry is always the one I will go to when they're playing Spain, and the entire stadium is singing that one. But then I think of the stuff from the last Euros, where I think like somebody had dented a car while they were celebrating a game, and then they were singing like "Fix the Car" for the boys in green.
Oh, I do remember
just
that.
All those, they just always seem to be the most like, I don't know, we're out to have fun, not to be angry about football. And I think that is fundamental to a good supporter culture.
Yeah, I remember Northern Ireland at the last. I know you were probably talking about Republic of Ireland there, but Northern Ireland at the last Euros were very good fun with a lot of their chants. Obviously, the Will Grigg one, which I don't think actually that was their chant. I think that was Wigan fans that came up with that one first, but they kind of adopted it and brought it to the mainstream, and they were very good fun. They seemed like they had a good chant in them.
They did indeed. And what go on, Taylor.
Oh, sorry, Ryan. I was going to say the last thing for me was that a thing, it's not even a chant, it's just a thing that I always really enjoy is what the crowd says in response to a goal tells you a lot about where the game is being played, because certainly in the United States and in England, everybody says yes or yeah. And so you can hear a group of people all going, yeah, like it goes up. Whereas in Turkey, they would say goal, which is automatically going to make it go down. And that's where you get that like, whoa, like when people score versus the high pitched one. Germany, I think they say Tor, so it's somewhere in between. But hearing what is said when the goal goes in also tells you a lot about where the game is being played. But I think those differences are also pretty fascinating.
They are indeed. And I think some of my favorite chants, and Graham mentioned one of them earlier, are those ones that breach international borders but don't have lyrics, like Seven Nation Army. And the way that spread was just absolutely fascinating, I think. And it's such a great, perfect chant for like international tournaments and stuff. And the other one, I think, is the Viking Thunderclap. I don't think we've mentioned that yet. The thing that Iceland sort of brought to Euro 2016, and we saw lots of clubs sort of or teams trying to do it afterwards, but not quite catching on. But that you know the atmosphere that generates within a stadium when the fans were doing that, it just looked absolutely incredible, Graham.
Yeah, absolutely. The Icelandic one is a good one. I hadn't forgotten about it, but in this discussion, I'd forgotten about it. And yeah, when you have a whole, I guess when you have that kind of choreography as well, I'm sure I've seen. My memory's failing me here, but I'm sure I've seen like one side of the stadium. Is this what you're talking about with Galatasaray, Taylor? Like one side kind of responding to the other side in sections. Yeah, mm-hmm. I think that's super impressive when you see that.
It's
I think the Viking clap lost a little bit of the steam for me, and I'm guessing maybe that's why you didn't remember it, Graham, because it was so good when the Icelandic team did it, because they had that one section of fans and they were all perfectly in unison. But it's such a specific thing that, like, if you're just taking a melody and changing the lyrics, that's one thing. But when you're stealing all the mannerisms or borrowing, I guess, all the so I've seen other people do that, other clubs, other national teams. I think the U.S. has done it for a couple games, and it always just rings a little hollow to me, because it's like that just feels like, no, that should just stay with Iceland. That maybe that's just me being like a prude. I don't know, but also I'm not the biggest fan of "I Believe That We Will Win." So maybe I'm just being a stick in the mud across the board.
What about "Fight and Win" from the Seattle Sound? Have you seen that one?
I don't know if I have.
The guy at CenturyLink Field or whatever it's called now, Lumen Field, going "Fight and Win." I feel like that's in a similar.
You doing it, Graham? I'd be more into it.
I feel like it's a similar category of to "I Believe We Will Win."
So Graham, like the one here, I have the lyrics for you. So it would be "Jim Bom Bom Boom Benim," and then the other side of the stadium would say "Biricik Sevgilem." And so it's like this big, but you have to. Turkish is, I think, like a lot of the words you speak with like the lower part of your throat, so it becomes this sort of booming, like "Söylesenden başka kimin var benim." Like it's this very deep thing that when you have the whole stadium doing that back and forth, it gets very loud and very booming.
That's like ASMR. That was wonderful, Taylor. Can you do that again?
I can do the whole song if you want, but I don't want to go too far with it. Jimbom bom bumayım, biricik sevgilem, söylesenden başka kimin var benim, seninle ağlarım, seninle gülerim, söylesenden başka kimin var benim.
And was that from a 90s Europop song, Taylor, as well?
I try.
Yeah. Where did that finish in Eurovision?
It was near the top, I think. Man, I love me some Eurovision. I would happily do an episode where we just broke down Eurovision, if you all were into that one.
My guilty pleasure and the secret
the silence tells me things.
The secret that I'll take to my I'm going to agree with you. See Eurovision night on social media is one of my favorite nights of the whole year. It's so much fun.
Yeah. All right, I feel we should stop now. Seeing as we've got this conversation. Also, my laptop's on 4% battery. This is a good time to stop. Listener, I hope you've learned something about songs and chants and their origins and our faves. Let us know what you think. For now, Taylor Rockwell, thank you so much. You've been wonderful.
As have you all. This has been great. Ryan, I did not think I would sing when we began this one. I was going to leave that one to you all. But there it is at the end. So thank you for that. Thank you for everything else.
I'm glad we got it out of you. And Graham Russell, I'm glad to hear your dulcet tones on this episode too.
Cheerio, cheerio, cheerio. Bye, Ryan.
Cheerio, cheerio.